The National Conservative Student Conference also heard from Housing Secretary Ben Carson. He talked about priorities for his department and the importance of overcoming challenges. This is Half an Hour.
Good evening again. We are excited to continue our program this evening in welcoming Secretary Ben Carson. This year, Dr. Ben Carson was sworn in as the 17th Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Born in Detroit to a single mother with a third-grade education who worked multiple jobs to support their family, Secretary Carson was raised to love reading and education. He graduated from Yale University and earned his MD from the University of Michigan Medical School. For nearly 30 years, Secretary Carson served as Director of Pediatric Neurosurgery at the Johns Hopkins Children's Center, a position he assumed when he was just 33 years old, becoming the youngest major division director in the hospital's history. But Dr. Carson is no stranger to making history. In 1987, he successfully performed the first ever separation of twins conjoined at the back of the head. Dr. Carson has received dozens of honors and awards in recognition of his achievements, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. He is also the recipient of the Spingarn Medal, the highest honor bestowed by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Dr. Carson has authored 9 books. U.S. News Media Group and Harvard's Center for Public Leadership named him among America's best leaders in 2008. Dr. Carson and his wife, Candy, co-founded the Carson's Scholarship Fund, which recognizes young people of all backgrounds for exceptional academic and humanitarian accomplishments. The fund is currently operating in 50 states and the District of Columbia and has recognized more than 7,300 scholars, awarded more than $7.3 million in scholarships, and has installed more than 150 Ben Carson reading rooms around the country. He and his wife are the proud parents of 3 adult sons and 3 grandchildren. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Secretary Ben Carson. Always a warm welcome. Well, we are certainly thrilled to have you here. You're always a great friend of the foundation. We had you speak to this conference back in 2014, so we're grateful for you for being back with us again.
Thank you.
So I want to start from the beginning. You overcame some of the most difficult circumstances from your childhood. You were raised by a single mother who instilled in you the value of education, of faith in God, and a belief in hard work. And growing up in an urban community, your story inspired so many of my peers, gave us faith that we could change the cycle that we were in. So how has your background helped you in your first few months with the administration, and what experience has stood out to you most thus far?
Well, my background was tremendously helpful to me because I grew up in an environment where I had an opportunity to see a lot of people with different kinds of mindsets. I saw people who had the can-do attitude, and I'm going to beat this. I saw people who had the just let me get by from day to day. And I saw people who said, oh my, I'm a victim. Somebody else is controlling my life. Why is everybody taking advantage of me? And I had an opportunity to see where each one of those kinds of attitudes led. But the key thing was my mother, who had every right to feel like a victim, but absolutely refused to be a victim and refused to allow us to be victims, and made us read books and give her written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And, it really changed the trajectory of my life enormously. And then when I was in medical school, when I first got in medical school, I did terribly on the first set of comprehensive exams. I mean, it was so bad, I went to see my advisor, who was supposed to be the person to get me through medical school, and he said, you're not cut out for medicine, you should drop out. I mean, this is the one who's supposed to be encouraging me. So, I was quite discouraged. I went home, I just prayed. I said, Lord, you got to show me what to do here. And I started thinking, what kind of courses have you always done well and what kind of courses have you struggled in? And I realized I did well in courses where I read a lot, and I struggled in courses where I listened to a lot of boring lectures, because I don't get anything out of boring lectures, nothing. 6 to 8 hours a day I was listening to boring lectures, so I made an executive decision to skip the boring lectures and to spend that time reading. And the rest of medical school was a snap after that. And, when I went back to my medical school years later as the commencement speaker, I was looking for that advisor because I was going to tell him he wasn't cut out to be an advisor. But both of those illustrations show you how important reading was to me. And, when I was confirmed in March, after being unanimously put through in January, but I finally got through in March, I'm still the only Senate confirmed person at HUD. Even though we got 2 through yesterday, they won't start until the middle of next week. So 5 months by myself. But that's where the reading came in again. Reading volumes and volumes of material of all the things that your deputy secretary and assistant secretaries are supposed to be telling you, and learning that stuff on your own. And more importantly, getting the cooperation of the people who've been there, the career people who everybody said were going to be horrible people. They're not horrible people if you work with them. And we need to get away from this whole concept that this group is bad and this group is good. Evaluate people on the basis of who they are and be willing to work with everybody. You'll go a lot further and a lot faster.
Definitely, I agree with that. But you've spoken and written about the challenges that you faced growing up and becoming the professional that you did, and I think that you've certainly touched on that a little bit. But do you think that it is more difficult for young people who are maybe in a similar situation that you once faced to replicate your experiences?
Well, it's interesting because some of you may have seen an article in the New York Times about 2.5 months ago. And they said that the United States, of all the Western countries, is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, to ascend the economic ladder. Now, if that was true, why would all these people be trying to get in here from other places? That doesn't make any sense, does it? And, if you really want to be inspired, go to the Horatio Alger website and read the stories of all of those people in this country who came from nothing and ascended to the pinnacle of our society in many ways. So, is it difficult? Of course it's difficult. It's difficult anywhere, but I think this is probably one of the easiest places. But it does require work. And that's the part that I think some people have forgotten. And they tend to believe that, everybody should be guaranteed, certain things, and it really doesn't matter whether you work for them or not. And, I am a very compassionate person, and I would like for everybody to be successful, but I think what we really owe everybody is the opportunity. And we have to put the ladders of opportunity there. And in some cases, you may have to point people to them and push them a little bit. But when people begin to realize what really is available to them, I think a lot of times the attitudes will change. And that's a place really where government can play a very important role, because we need to reckon is going to become part of the engine or part of the load. And depending on how we structure things, we can get a lot more people to be part of the engine, and we can move a lot faster that way.
Certainly. And Just to elaborate on that a bit, so you talked about the American dream and the ladders of opportunity, but HUD's mission is to create a strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and a quality, affordable housing for all. So as a conservative who supports limited government, what role do you think that the department can play in helping the next generation achieve the American dream of home ownership?
Well, home ownership is such a vital part of success in the sense that it is the principal source of wealth building for an average American family. The average homeowner has a net value of $200,000. The average renter, $5,000. That's a huge difference. And that's why, years ago, there was this huge push. Everybody should own a home. And the people who said that, they meant well. And they, eliminated all kinds of barriers and said, oh, you don't have to have a down payment and all these things. But, to put somebody in a home they can't afford, that's really not compassionate, because they lose the home, they lose their credit, and they lose their future opportunities. And again, I'm not saying that they were bad people, but what we have to do is we have to learn from the things that people do so that we can do things in a much more responsible way. And, now particularly as we look at some of the millennials and the difficulties that they're having getting homes, because so many of them come out of college or graduate school with huge debts. And it's not like it was 30 or 40 or 50 years ago when you would get these subsidized educational loans that you paid back at 2%. Now it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% compounded. It's like having a house, a mortgage. And, they come out, they have a terrible debt-to-income ratio. They just don't qualify. So one of the things that we're doing, for instance, through the Housing Opportunity Modernization Act, is creating a circumstance whereby you can buy a condominium with an FHA backing. And that will make it much, much more affordable. And, condominiums are frequently the first step on that ladder of home ownership. And then, Fannie Mae is now working on decreasing the debt-to-income ratio qualifications. And we're also looking at ways of rolling the student debt into the mortgage all in one low-interest package. So, we're looking at ways to change that dynamic, and I think we'll be successful.
Fantastic. Well, HUD was formed in the midst of LBJ's Great Society expansion of government. Do you think that the founders of the department would be surprised by the housing challenges that we still have 52 years later? And where do you expect HUD to be 52 years from now?
Well, I think they probably would be surprised because, again, they meant well. And they thought, if we give people, a leg up with these housing subsidies and things, it will put them in a position to then really accelerate. But what they would have found, probably much to their chagrin, is that some of the same people that they put into those houses are still there, generation after generation, and really have not taken advantage of the situation. But I think it had to do with the way the systems were designed. Not only housing, but a whole host of welfare-type problems that tended to keep people comfortable in a setting where it wasn't really necessary to achieve. And again, it sounds like a wonderful, compassionate thing to do. But when you stop and think about it, is that really compassion? Or is real compassion trying to develop people to their fullest extent? So, that's, for instance, one of the things that we're doing now with the Envision centers. These are places that are being put into the low-income areas. that would be a nidus for mentorship programs, for childcare, for basic instruction, for a whole host of things that, quite frankly, a young person growing up in a traditional family with an extended family with a bunch of people who really had their interests in mind and would help them would get. Mm-hmm. But people who are in situations where they're frequently born to a teenage mom, they don't have a father figure, all kinds of things are going on, and they're not getting those things. We're trying to replace those things in their lives in order to give them an opportunity. But the key thing, and we don't have to wait 52 years to do this, is, we need to create ladders of opportunity. It's not about just putting people under a roof. It's about getting people to develop their God-given talent. And I hope 52 years from now, it will be fully realized that the definition of success in housing is not how many people we can put in public housing, but how many people we can get out of it.
Well, with these ladders of opportunities and whatnot, based on your life experience, what career advice would you have to offer today's young conservatives?
Well, I would think, first of all, learn how you learn. Everybody learns differently, so make sure you learn how you learn. But, my philosophy for success in life is summed up 2 words: think big. The T is for talent, which God gave to every single person, not just the ability to sing and dance and throw a ball, but intellectual talent. Intellectual talent is what helped America ascend rapidly to the pinnacle. The H is for honesty. Lead a clean and honest life. Don't put skeletons in the closet, because if you do, they will come back to haunt you, just when you don't want to see them, guaranteed. The I is for insight, which comes from listening to people who've already gone where you're trying to go. Learn from their triumphs, learn from their mistakes. If you can learn from someone else's mistakes, you can go a whole lot further and a whole lot faster. The N is for nice. Be nice to people. Because once they get over their suspicion of why you're being nice, they'll be nice to you. And you can get so much more done when you're being nice and they're being nice. And can we all just take the niceness pledge? Just raise your hand right where you are. Everybody, now if the person beside you doesn't have their hand up, you may kick them. Okay. Because after this, you have to be nice. Now, what did you just pledge to do? To be nice to every single person you encounter for 1 week. Okay? Now, what does that mean? That means no talking about people behind their back for a week. Okay? Some people may stroke out, I understand. It means you see somebody struggling with something, you're going to help them. Men, it means we're opening the doors for the ladies and holding their chairs for them. Okay? Ladies, it means you're not cursing them out when they do that. And you're going to get on the elevator, there's no more spots or just one spot, you're going to let somebody else get on. And when you get on the elevator, you're not going to act like you never saw the numbers change before. Speak to people. You might have to practice CPR, but speak to people. You're going to get in your car, the parking lot is jam full, and 3 people are following you in their car because they want your space. When you get in the car, you're not going to open the glove box and pull down the mirror. Just get out of the space and let them have it. Don't have to revel in your power. But what are you doing during that week? Thinking about others first. What kind of a nation could we have if we thought about others first? And you're the next generation. You've got to do better than my generation that hate people who don't agree with them. We can do so much better than that. And if two people agree about everything, one of them isn't necessary. So, let's just get over all this hatred stuff and learn how to have intelligent conversations with each other. Talk about why you believe what you believe. It'll make all the difference in the world.
That's In an ideal world, especially on college campuses, that would be fantastic. And I know that you're a devout Christian, and over the course of your time in the spotlight, you haven't shied away from expressing your faith. And even in the most difficult times, your faith appears to be unwavering. But what role did faith play in your professional development? And then what advice would you have for young people, especially those on college campuses who feel as though their religious freedom is under attack?
Well, it has played a very large role in my life, really ever since, I was a teenager. When I was 14 and I tried to stab someone else. It was interesting during the campaign. Some of the media said, that didn't happen. We can't prove that he ever had a bad temper. We even went back and talked to some people who had no idea what it was talking about. And that proves that he didn't know. And then when the Parade magazine article came up where they did an extensive interview with my mother back in 1997, she was on the front cover and she talked all about my temper. They just slink back into the shadows. But, the fact of the matter is, it was that episode, recognizing that if that young man hadn't had that belt buckle on, my life would have been completely changed. And yet, it shows how God can take a knife that I was going to use to kill somebody and change it into a scalpel to save lives. And that kind of thing. But as you said, I've never shied away from talking about it. I was once in a public debate in California with Richard Dawkins. Many of you know who that is, the world's foremost evolutionist. And he thinks anybody who doesn't believe the way he does is a total idiot. And he's not shy about letting you know that. And so toward the end of the debate, I said, you know what? I think you have won because you've convinced me that I came from God and you came from a monkey. Needless to say, he wasn't too pleased. But even if a person is not in any way religious, there's nothing wrong with living by godly principles, of loving your fellow man, of caring about your neighbor, of developing your God-given talents to the utmost so that you become valuable to the people around you, of having values and principles that govern your life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that advice. Looking back at last year's historic election, and that's to say the least, what lessons did you learn as a presidential candidate, and what surprised you the most?
Well, it became very clear that the people of this country, and I got to tell you, I was so impressed with the people everywhere in this country, every part of this country, everybody was just wonderful to me. But I think they were looking for an outsider because the insiders, they hadn't done such a great job in either party. And, that was a bit surprising. But I also got a very good opportunity to get to know all the other people who were running and seeing what kind of people they were. And the person I ended up being very impressed with was Donald Trump. And I'll tell you the reason, during the debates, if any of you watched them, you noticed that they didn't ask me many questions. He was the only one that complained about that. The others, I think, were happy they weren't asking me questions. And then during one of the debates, I couldn't hear my name being announced, and I was standing there waiting. Everybody else walked past me except Trump. He stood there with me until they straightened it out, and that told me what kind of person he was. So when it came to the place where, I had concluded that I couldn't get enough delegates to be the winner, and I dropped out, I had to decide quickly to make an endorsement because we were heading to a brokered convention, and that would have been a disaster. So it was relatively easy for me to make that choice, and I'm very happy that I did.
I had not heard that story about Donald Trump staying with you at the debate. And what are some of the other untold stories and successes within HUD and the administration that the media has neglected to cover, and of what accomplishments are you most proud?
Well, they love stories like Secretary gets stuck in the elevator. They just go crazy. I mean, it was all over the country before I even got out of the elevator. But the fact of the matter is there's just been, many successes. I would love it if they talked about how the people at HUD, the career people, the people who came in on the transition team, how they stepped up to the plate, recognizing that I didn't have any assistant secretaries or deputy secretary. And they have kept things moving at a very rapid pace, and we've been able to fulfill all of our obligations and some, and begin to really reorient things and change from a bureaucracy to a business model. We've hired a COO, a CIO, we're bringing on a CFO, and taking a holistic view of the problems that exist and fixing them rather than putting a little patchwork here and there. And those are the kinds of things that I think are going to make an incredible difference. Then you look at something like the RAD program, the Rental Assistance Demonstration, where there may be a public housing unit that's far behind in terms of repairs and things that need to be done. And we're able to turn those over to developers with the understanding that affordable units will be built, and we have ways of filling in, subsidizing the gap. And you have a lot of local interest now in that project, so that it is extremely well maintained. It's a win-win situation because the residents now have a beautiful place. And right now, we're leveraging every public dollar with 19 private dollars. That's what I'm talking about with public-private partnerships. And this is the way that we will ultimately be able to catch up, because right now, we really have a crisis in terms of affordable housing. For every person we can help, there are 3 that are in need. And, over the years, lots of money has been poured into this, and the numbers of people continue to grow that need housing. We'll be able to catch up, but not only will we be able to catch up, but really be able to create kinds of programs that will provide people with the opportunity to ascend the ladder economically and get out of these programs, so that, once again, we have a can-do society.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.